Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Canada is removing many of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, arguing they aren't the right tool for this current moment.
What we're doing, again, is matching what the U.S. is doing. That's fair. It's fair to match what they've done. And it puts us in a better position to focus in on exactly those sectors, work for it. So sometimes, to go back to the earlier question, you drop the gloves in the first period. When you're late in the game, dropping the gloves and taking the extra penalty might not be the best thing to do.
As trade tensions continue with the U.S., what could this mean for negotiations between the two countries? James Moore is a former Conservative industry minister, and he joins me now. Hey, James, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure's mine.
How would you characterize what the Prime Minister has done here with the retaliatory tariffs? Is it a form of capitulation, a betrayal, or do you see it as, an act of goodwill to try and get a deal done?
I think it's appropriate for the moment, but there's a piece of his analogy that is unknown. He says that there are times in a hockey game where you do want to go into the corners, elbows up, and maybe drop the gloves, and there's times to be more disciplined and finesse things. But at the end of the analogy that you just played right there, as he said, when you're heading towards the end of a game and it's very close, maybe you don't want to take a penalty. So the question is, are we towards the end of the game? How close are we towards the end of the game? That's the question that we don't know. And the media availability that you're clipping right now next to me here, the Prime Minister said that one of the things that President Trump said is that they are negotiations, and that the tariff consideration and the trade issue of Kuzma and the renegotiation that was expected for calendar 26 will be either moved forward or sort of sistered with the tariff conversation. Well, that's new news, and I think Canadians and industries that are in workers who are impacted by the tariff question will be, wanting to see more information about what exactly that timeline looks like, what's on the table, and how it is that we're going to approach this, and also the question of where's Mexico in this. So there are a lot of questions still in front of us.
Yeah, Prime Minister Carney is sort of pitching this as Trump personally assured him that dropping these retaliatory tariffs would kickstart the negotiations. Again, things were stalled. This is a way to clear the logjam. Are you buying what he's selling with that rhetoric?
I don't know. I mean, I think, as I said, it's the appropriate policy. The Prime Minister is correct that Canada did do retaliatory tariffs. Now, he did become, he won the Liberal leadership, became the Prime Minister, then was a later elected Prime Minister. And in that sort of window of blur of 45 to 60 days, rhetoric was pretty hot about elbows up and standing in solidarity. Premier Ford was saying what he was saying. All Canadians were saying what they were saying. And there was a bit of a catharsis there, a bit of a venting about energy. And it wasn't just about tariffs. It was about the President of the United States saying that Canada is not a real country. Donald Trump saying that we could be a 51st state. We'd be lucky to be a 51st state. So the pushback and the anger that existed and still exists for a lot of Canadians, it wasn't just tariff-based. It was about the belligerence and the aggression that came from the White House and the way in which the President of the United States seemed to dismiss a longtime trading partner and an ally. So, we were elbows up in the beginning, and the Prime Minister saying dollar for dollar tariffs and all that. But at a certain point, the arithmetic of that runs out. Less than 1% of Canada's daily less than 1% of the American daily GDP output is dependent on trade access into Canada. About 1/5 of Canada's daily GDP output is dependent on access to the United States. So the sustainability of us in a full-blown permanent trade war with the United States, it would hurt America, it would hurt Canadians as well. And then you layer on top of it the go-forward dynamic of you're going to have reciprocal tariffs on American goods coming into Canada. Well, now you're punishing Canadian consumers and you're annoying the American president. So I think we made our point. There's a place for countervailing and reciprocal tariffs in certain industries that are being treated grossly unfairly by the administration: steel, aluminum, certain food products, and those are going to be continued going forward. But the idea of getting more and more every day towards a tariff-free, mutually accessible, free market access in both economies is really an important place. So if we're marching down that path, that's a good thing for Canada.
There are some groups, some organizations that want to maintain these retaliatory tariffs. They do want dollar for dollar. We heard from Unifor, which represents a lot of the workers that are in these affected industries. They're not happy with Carney's move. They want to keep those countermeasures in place. We also heard from the steel sector. They're disappointed as well. What's your message to those groups that are calling for more tariffs and to keep what we had in place for longer and perhaps even go further?
I imagine the Prime Minister is open to adjusting his policy going forward, because it has wavered and adjusted in the past going forward. And also, we have to be mindful that the President of the United States, as we saw in the past with 232 tariffs and the current 232 tariffs, and invoking national security as a reason to say that British Columbia lumber may not be allowed into the United States. We are in a position here where it's fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. So the flexibility of the Prime Minister to have an approach to tariffs is responsible. But I also think in some ways it's kind of healthy that the Prime Minister is getting criticized by not just political opponents, but also being criticized by unions and industry groups and consumer groups and others. I think there's a healthy dialogue in the country, because it actually shows, I think, to the Americans that the Prime Minister of the country is trying to get something done here in a way that is going to be beneficial, not just for Canada, not just for the United States, but for the whole of the North American platform that needs to be solid so that we can stay competitive with the rising threat of China in the global space. By the way, I just want to add, I think the most important thing among the most important things, but maybe that came out of last week, was the press conference that President Trump had after speaking to Prime Minister Carney. He didn't call him Governor Carney. He didn't, he said that he liked Mark Carney. He said that he liked working with the Prime Minister. That's a good thing. Prime Minister Carney is going to have a lot of criticism, and that's fine. A lot of political criticism, that's fine. I don't know the politics of this and what it's going to look like in the fullness of time. I don't know. But the fact that we've gone from the President of the United States chastising, laughing at, calling names of the Prime Minister of Canada, to saying that not only is he going to drop that, but he likes Mark Carney and likes working with him. I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to bet my house on it, but I'm hopeful that will lead to a more constructive dialogue between the President and the Prime Minister.
Definitely more complimentary of Carney than he was of Trudeau. There's no doubt about it. And just as we're speaking now, there's something moving on the wires, James. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc has just arrived in Washington. There's going to be some more talks between him and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick over the next couple of days. They haven't spoken in person in quite some time. Do you read that as a sign that the retaliatory tariffs being dropped, that was welcomed by Washington, and now, hey, come on down, let's talk? Is that a positive development?
I like to think of myself as an optimistic person, but I will retreat to my line: fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. So I'm hopeful. Look, Minister LeBlanc is an experienced politician. He's obviously built good inroads with certain members of the administration. The question is whether or not Mr. Secretary Lutnick has, predominant influence over the president. We don't know. But I think conversation is good. Dialogue is good. Maybe the Minister LeBlanc will tell Secretary Lutnick about what's happening in Canada and the shift that's happening and the efforts to cool things down. And I really do think that narrative about not just what's good for America, what's good for Canada, but what's good for the North American economic union that has led to more peace and prosperity and integration economically, that has led to the highest quality of life of any cohort of human beings in human history as a result of NAFTA and now CUSMA and that relationship. And trying to blow that apart by going after a particular auto mandate, for example, and trying to repatriate that down to Michigan or Kentucky or South Carolina. There's a bigger picture and a bigger dynamic at play here. And I think that we as Canadians can never tire, and also our American and Mexican allies can never tire of telling the story about the success of North America when we are united economically and facing the rest of the world and trading with the rest of the world as a unit. I think it's only positive for all of us.
All right, let's leave it there. James Moore, former Conservative Industry Minister, thanks for coming on, sir. Nice to see you.
Pleasure was mine.